Good evening. My name is Faith Zerby, Z-E-R, as in boy, E as in Edward. I'm a biologist with Delaware Riverkeeper Network. And what I wanted to say first, I wanted to say to the folks behind me before I get started with the science. As the gentleman who spoke before me mentioned, the Williams Pipeline will make you feel alone. It'll make you feel like disempowered, right? We have the power here. We've had some legal decisions lately to really change the playing field, right? Delaware Riverkeeper Network sued FERC, right, to look at segmentation, to say you have to look at the cumulative impact throughout the build-out of gas drilling and these pipelines. So this is a victory and this is a win, and I wanted to say that we need to stand together. No pipeline path is a good path, whether it's going through agricultural fields, a backyard, a forest, a wetland, a stream. It's all leading to fracked gas that's harming most of our neighbors in drilling areas. Some people are getting rich, absolutely. And we understand that. We understand the implications that come with that and the feeling that they feel that there's no other thing that they can do. But we have to remember we need to shut these pipelines down. And if we stick together, we organize, we have tables out front, Clean Air Councils out there. You may have heard Sam earlier. We have the Lebanon folks. Lancaster had over 250 people at their meeting last night. We've got people in Susquehanna organizing. We've got Shale Justice. We've got Delaware Riverkeeper Network. And if we stand together, this pipeline will not be built. So I just wanted to address you and thank you all for coming out and taking time out of your day to try to ensure that FERC does their job at the government level. So thank you. So now just a little bit about pipelines. As I said, I'm a biologist with Delaware Riverkeeper Network. We had a pipeline that went through the upper Poconos through exceptional value and high quality streams. It was called the Tennessee Gas Line. And what we learned from that, of course, is that destruction along the route is expansive and long. FERC needs to look at the entire build-out of gas drilling. They need to look at the upstream impacts of the hydraulic fracturing that's happening. They need to look at all of the stream cuts that are going through the areas of all the different pipelines. Folks mentioned Cove Point. 1,000 people showed up in D.C. to protest Cove Point. 26 people got arrested in front of the headquarters of FERC, many of them from Pennsylvania, to say no to exporting gas. So we're building together and we're seeing results. FERC needs to look at the independent quantitative risk assessment of explosion hazards that could reach nearby homes, forests, and ag lands. FERC needs to look at the other pipelines that are connecting, not just Cove Point. When Cove Point exports that gas, we have to refrigerate the gas to make it a liquid and send it abroad. That all causes fossil fuel emissions. We know that the oil and gas industry is the single largest source of methane emissions in the United States. It accounts for nearly 40% of natural methane emissions. Methane is 17 times more heat trapping than carbon dioxide. So as we permit more pipelines, we are digging a deeper hole in climate change. We cannot afford to do that. We cannot wait. We cannot have another pipeline go in. FERC needs to consider all of those impacts. For example, the Leidy line, which FERC is right now looking at and examining and determining if we should allow a pipeline running east to west. That one loop of the Leidy line, and again, loop was a game that the gas drillers played, the pipeliners played to segment projects. They're not allowed to do that anymore because of the recent court decision. They have to look at the full impact. That Franklin loop and the Leidy line would impact 204 acres of land. It would cross over 33 streams and over 45 wetlands, many of which were exceptional value and high quality. And that's just one section of loop, 59 miles. FERC needs to consider that. Sediment impacts are a big thing that I saw as a stream biologist out along pipelines. These pipelines cut through. The company takes the cheapest method to go through our very cleanest streams in the Commonwealth. And folks have pointed out we have the right to clean air and clean water. When you put sediment into streams and rivers, it destroys drinking water quality downstream, it destroys fish habitat, Pennsylvania is known for recreation, it's known for its trout streams, it's known for bog turtles and other endangered species. All of these things need to be considered with this line. If FERC considers all of these things, there is absolutely no way that FERC could issue a certificate of the public necessity. This is not for the public good, and there is absolutely no way that if they look at the science that they could allow this. So we have to keep on that. The Nature Conservancy has looked at forest fragmentation because often people will say, well, let's go into the forest, let's go into the preserved land. The Nature Conservancy found that expanding pipeline network could eliminate habitat conditions needed by interior forest species on between 360,000 and 900,000 acres as new forest edges along pipelines. So when the pipeline builds that 100-foot right-of-way or whatever ridiculous amount they're asking for to put a 42-inch pipe, on either side of that, 300 feet in to the forest, there is impacts. Thermal changes happen, invasive species move in, the hydrology changes. So these need to be considered. The pipeline company also talks about temporary workspaces. This again is a game that the pipeline company plays, and FERC needs to be aware and be on notice. They have to consider those temporary impacts. Farmers have talked about soil compaction. It's an issue. Pipeline companies will come in, they'll cut down the trees to park cars, near wetland crossings especially, and then they will say it's a temporary impact. That's absolutely not the case. It changes. Delaware Riverkeeper Network has science. We'll be submitting that to FERC again, as we have done with the Libby line, to show that soil compaction is a real issue in these temporary workspaces. We also have to consider endangered species. For example, bats. People will say, well, who cares about bats? Well, we have to look at the impacts that gas drilling has on bats, and we have an expert scientific report that shows what that impact would be for gas drilling. And again, that goes back to the farmers. If they have to have more pesticides because there aren't any bats to eat the insects, this is a problem, and this needs to be considered in the FERC review. And again, just talking a little bit about gas drilling, FERC needs to consider the casing and cement failures that have happened in DEP. The gentleman up front had the map of the over 200 instances where there's been water contamination already, and that is DEP's own numbers. What about the hazardous waste disposal of brine water? What about the radioactivity of that water that comes up? What about the diesel trucks that have to carry that very heavy water right now to our friends in Ohio so they can deep well inject it into deep well injections? What about the BTEX chemicals that are in it and the health effects from these chemicals and the VOCs that I'm sure Clean Air Council talked about? Also, water consumption. We have to remember that fresh water is finite. We're using the same fresh water that we've been using for millions of years. It's a recycled process. When frackers are deep well drilling into these wells, about 60% of that water stays down in the underlayment and the geology. About 40% comes back up. It depends on the shale play. But again, fresh water is a concern. We all need it to survive. We need it for our businesses. We need it for our liveries. We need it for the fishing industries and all the other industries that are going to suffer if we allow the companies to keep coming in and treating Pennsylvania like a sacrificial gas zone. We've had enough. We've had enough pipelines, and it's time that we stand up, and FERC now needs to do that. So thank you for your time. One last comment. I am from Schuylkill County, and I do request that there would be hearings in Schuylkill County. These meetings were public noticed, and here we are in the beginning of August. People are on vacations. So if you wanted to appear transparent, you need to have additional meetings with more time so people can actually come out, take the time off work, get babysitters for the kids to come out to these meetings to learn things. You also need to be sure that Williams has a Q&A session where people can actually talk to the company and ask questions collectively, because that's a tactic that's been used over and over again to disenfranchise the public. So we need to learn from each other, and you need to be on our side first. You need to be on our side this time, not the industries. Thank you very much.
My name is Richard Blount, spelled B-L-O-U-C-H. My wife and I have a small farm in Union Township. which borders on the Soterra Creek. We are not in the path of the pipeline. Fortunate for us, unfortunate for others. I drove here tonight, and I imagine most everybody who is here tonight came here in cars. We are all so dependent on hydrocarbons that we have become addicts of the hydrocarbon industry. Not only us, but our nation as well is addicted to hydrocarbons. Of course, gas is one of those hydrocarbons. Now that makes us very susceptible and very susceptible to the changes that energy companies want to make. In other words, if they want to put in a pipeline, so be it. We need it. We have to have it. We don't think about saving fuel. We don't think about sustainable sources of energy. Two reasons why I'm opposed to this pipeline. One is a transmission corridor already exists for the transportation of gas. What Sunrise wants to do is make a shortcut. Now, is that shortcut for any reason other than the profits of the company? And the second one is that I had questions about how much of this gas is going to be domestically used and how much is going to be exported. I think the speakers tonight have very well answered that question, that this gas is not for you and I. This gas is for the company, for the profits to be made in exporting the gas. I thank you.
Hello, I'm Christine Baumgartner.
I dropped my glasses and we can't find them, so she should go.
I'm a homeowner and a property owner in Lebanon County. I have a couple concerns that some people have already mentioned, but I just wanted my voice to be heard. I'm not a professional speaker. I just jotted some notes down. I also work back at Fort Indian Town Gap, and as many people know, there's a declining population of fritillary butterflies back there, and I think that should be noted. I have not heard anybody mention that. The other thing is that Union Township, of course, is where Fort Indian Town Gap is located, and as one man mentioned today, there is a bombing ground there, and they're currently expanding it. The bombs and the bullets that they're using today aren't big enough, so they're going to make the bombing ground bigger. What kind of impact could that possibly have on a gas line? I think, to me, it sounds like danger. And when I was at the Annville PA school at the Williams meeting, at the open house, and I asked that question, how will a bombing ground affect the pipeline? The Williams representative that I spoke to told me he wasn't aware there was a bombing ground in Lebanon County. What was I talking about? Where is this bombing ground in Union Township? To me, that's either incompetent or dishonest. One or the other. It cannot be both. I personally don't do business with people like that. If I can't trust somebody, I'm not going to do business with them. I think the noise and the vibration is serious enough that we hear it on our local news announcing there will be bombing at the Gap this weekend. If you hear noise or you feel vibration, don't be alarmed. I am very alarmed now that you're considering putting a pipeline through there. I asked Williams representatives, what is their alternative to the Fort Indian Town Gap area? And they took me and showed me 4 different maps. Every one of them had the same path through Fort Indian Town Gap. Not only does Fort Indian Town Gap have a bombing ground, but they have an airfield. A plane could crash. I'm not running away from every danger that there is possible in life, but it's reality. I'm more of a pragmatist. This is too dangerous to come through the Fort Indian Town Gap area. It's going to annihilate everything. If there would be an accident, there's an 81 north and south main corridor for the East Coast transportation that would probably be affected. I don't hear people talking about possible effects like that. One day after I heard a report about how safe this pipeline's going to be, the next day I heard a report about a fire at a pumping station up in I think it was in Sullivan or Bradford County. So I have heard a lot of these accidents and incidents that have happened. No, they're not planned. No, we don't expect them to happen. But it's a reality. They do happen. Then the other thing that I have a big concern about is my own personal property. I bought a house in the woods. They're going to cut all my trees down. I'm not going to have a house in the woods anymore. I said, well, how are you going to replace these? Some of these trees are over 100 years old. There's no plans to replace that. I've invested in real estate. That I'm nearing my retirement age now, and I should be able to do with that real estate what I want to do. I should be able to decide if I want to sell it, if I want to develop it, how do I want to make money. But one of my properties will be useless. It'll be a pipeline, and there will never be able to be anything else on it. So I'm going to get a token amount of money, a one-time payment for this right away, and I'm never going to get any future profits from this land. I'm not going to get any future benefit either. I can't use that gas. I'm not getting a royalty or a future payment. I can't even build a house on some of this property if I want to. I just think what I worked for and what I dreamed, I should be able to decide. Somebody else shouldn't be taking it away from me and deciding it for me. I'm just a concerned, tax-paying American citizen. This is just not right. The greed of the company should not trump the American citizens. Williams will continue to make profits with or without this north-south corridor. They won't make as high profits. They're not going to go out of business. They're not going to lose jobs. They're just going to have profit, but not as much. I think it's time to stop this greed. Thank you.
Pardon me. It's my turn.
I used to get into record that lady's name because she did not settle and she came out to speak for our court reporter.
Okay, I thought she was behind me and I told her so she could go ahead.
That's right, but the court reporter did not have her name. She didn't say it. So I had to say it to get it into record and spell it so it could be accurately recorded in the record. So you're perfectly start.
So in other words, I lose my turn?
No.
Well then when do I speak?
Just now. I just had to get that lady's name into the record correctly.
Thank you. My name is Pat Stevens. I'm a resident of South Annville Township. I am surprised at the small crowd here tonight, but then of course you scheduled this on National Night Out, and poor date to call a meeting. I am not an expert on these matters. I do not have facts and figures, only concerns. A few of those concerns are the taking of people's land, the probability of present and future leaks, and they will happen, the loss of the land for other uses. What and where will the next pipeline request be? The impact on our air and water. There are too many pipelines in this country crossing this country today. We do not need more. What are we leaving for those who come behind us? Thank you.
My name is Nate Lyons. I'm a local educator. As you well know, we live in a complex society. The issues and decisions you must contemplate are equally complex. Interestingly enough, children often have the sensibility to put complex issues into perspective. I was driving to the local YMCA with my 2 young boys, and I was getting ready to pull into a parking space when my son yelled at me to stop. He startled me, and I was getting ready to berate him when he said, "Dad, look, leave no trace." He then pointed to a plastic water bottle that had been run over and lying in the middle of the parking space. He asked if he could get out of the car and pick it up and dispose of it properly. I checked to make sure that he was safe and proudly told him, "Of course you may get up and pick up the bottle." You see, my son is a Cub Scout, and he's learning about minimizing his impact on the environment. Leave no trace is a scouting philosophy that teaches outdoor ethics. Principles include proper planning to minimize the damage to natural and cultural resources. Others include fostering a respect for wildlife and private property. The principles of Leave No Trace teach scouts to be stewards of the environment by leaving it as they have found. They go so far as to replace sticks and rocks when they remove them from their campsite before leaving. Scouts strive to reduce the amount of stress they place on wildlife by viewing it from afar, and are also taught to respect the property rights of others by leaving gates open or closed as they are found. If you ever find yourselves needing direction on how to best balance our country's energy needs while seeking to minimize the environmental impacts, look to the principles of scouting. Perhaps then you will be able to see the issue with the same clarity as my son, who is well on his way to earning his Leave No Trace badge. Thank you.
Speakers list here, but if there's anybody else that would like to make some comments, we have some time to do that. But you just need to come up to the microphone to make your comments, and please say your name and spell it for us so we can get it into the record correctly. Is anybody interested in doing that? I guess not. Well then. I'd like to thank you all for coming out here tonight, and so the formal part of this meeting is concluding. And on behalf of the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, I would like to thank you all for coming tonight, and let the record show that the Transco Atlantic Sunrise Expansion Project Scoping Meeting in Annville, Pennsylvania concluded at 9:15 p.m. Thank you all.